Active Directory. So Active Directory is basically used when let us not focus on the definition right now. Let us I'll give you an example of what is Active Directory first, and then we'll go to the definition part. So when there is a large organization has multiple employees, hundreds and thousands of employees, maybe lakhs of employees in case of big consulting companies, and they have multiple departments such as accounting, HR, IT, marketing, and they have different type of resources as well, maybe laptops, workstations, printers, and they are based on different location. For example, there is a company who is in Boston. There is the same company has another branch in New York. Then they have one more branch in Atlanta, Dallas. So they need some mechanism to manage resources, which are laptops, printer, kiosks, workstations, and they also need a mechanism to manage users, departments, employees, and they also need to manage the data for it. So how do they do is they use a technology called Active Directory. Active Directory stores the information in directory or folder structure. So Active Directory is a server-side mechanism, we can say that. So there is a Active Directory server, and that server will store the information in this kind of a format, directory format. And whenever you log in from in your laptop, whenever you log in your Outlook, or whenever you log in, whenever you access a network resource, maybe you can visit a shared network, and in that when you try to access any file or any machine via remote desktop, it will, the authentication and the authorization part of it, login and the access part of it will happen via Active Directory server. So Active Directory is a server-side mechanism for managing the users, the different departments, different resources such as laptop, workstations, and as well as the files and resources. And this is the overall use case of it, and it is used for managing the users, resources, and the files and data part of it. So it is one shop, all one stop shop for all the users and data and machines. So this is the main use of it. Companies need one single mechanism for authentication and authorization for everything. So this is why they use Active Directory. And Active Directory server stores the data in directory format, which is the folder, subfolder kind of mechanism. This is called the directory structure. So as we mentioned that Active Directory, as we saw, Active Directory is a directory based identity related service. Identity related service means you provide your username, email ID, and the password, and this is how they identify you. And identification is used for authentication, whether the ID and password is correct, whether you are the right user, and for the authorization part of it, whether you have the authority to access a file or a machine or not. And it allows the management of storage of information and users and the resources. So this is the use of Active Directory. Now for one company, this is how they will implement the Active Directory. They will have the company domain, and in that so let's say there is a company called abc.com. So the company domain will be abc.com, and they will have multiple OUs. We'll have a look at in detail. Just give me a minute. I have okay, so I'll simplify it here a bit. So let's say this company abc.com has multiple branches in multiple cities. So let's say there is one branch in London, another branch is in New York, another branch is in Paris, and there is a global branch or global division. So in London division, they have users which are employees, and they have groups. First is London group, then there is UK sales group, and then there is UK telesales group. So let's say if there is a file, or if there is a folder, or if there is a machine which or a resource which should be only applicable to sales group. So what I'll do is I'll create that file, I'll create that shared network or shared folder, and I will assign it to the UK sales group. So only So users who belong, and then I'll add from 100 employees of London branch, I'll add 5 employees to the sales group, UK sales group. So those 5 employees will by default will have access to it. Other will not be able to access that resource or that file share or that folder. Same goes for this. So this is how they will manage the entire implementation. Users will belong to some business unit. Users will also belong to some group, and then whatever the information or resources are, be it a file, be it a share network, be it a shared folder, will be allocated to either a specific user or a group. So this is how abc.com will manage their Active Directory implementation. This is just an example. Now Active Directory is a server. So Active Directory as a domain, and domain as a domain controller, and this is how they will implement. So Active Directory is a server side mechanism, but to access it we need something. So there is a thing which is residing at server side, but when to access it we need a protocol. For example, applications are hosted on server, website is hosted on a server, but to access that website we needed protocol, and that protocol is called HTTP protocol or HTTPS protocol. So website is hosted on a server, you have your laptop, but you can't connect. To access that website you need a mechanism, and that mechanism is protocol. So in case of website, the protocol is HTTP. In case of for Active Directory you have multiple protocols, and one of the protocol is LDAP protocol. So traditionally they were using DAP, which is Directory Access Protocol, but there is a lightweight version of it which is called LDAP, which is called a lightweight directory access protocol. Why they are using it? Because it is more resource efficient, it consumes less resources, it's a lighter version of it, it's a light version of DAP. So that is why we use LDAP, which is lightweight directory access protocol. Now there is an LDAP server which stores all the Active Directory information, and we need to receive that information from the server. We need to log in, or we need to access a file or access a report, access a file or access a shared network. So we'll use LDAP protocol to retrieve or query information from the LDAP server. LDAP server will store the authentication information such as username and password, and once we type our username and password via LDAP protocol, my username and password will be sent to the server. LDAP server will perform the authentication, and it will let me know that whether this is the right username password or not. And so there is only one LDAP server, and there are multiple applications: Outlook, OneDrive, Microsoft Office 365. So there is only one server, and multiple applications or multiple services can connect to the LDAP and validate the users. For example, if I log in Outlook web, Outlook desktop, Office 365, OneDrive, maybe SharePoint. So these all are the different services and applications which will connect to only one thing, which is the LDAP server. So this is how they unify or simplify the login process, or in simple format we call it SSO, which is single sign-on. So this is how the Active Directory and LDAP works in a bit. And now we need to understand how the information is stored in LDAP, or how LDAP works. So LDAP mechanism is based on DN, which is distinguished name, and it's like a unique identifier. So one DM will look like this. So CN stands for common name, this stands for the business department, and this stands for domain controller, and this is the domain. So for example, common name is Richard, he belongs to physics departments, and then the domain controller is Caltech, and this is the EDU, which means this is an educational domain. Now there is a user ID called Newton, and he belongs to mathematics department, and he belongs to Cambridge, and the domain is .com. So this is how the DN works, and this is how the LDAP stores the information in a unique identifier. Now before we start having a look at the LDAP, we need to understand the common operators for it. When is equal to, let us come to let us cover this in the next slide. But before, so this is how the process works. So this is the query. So once you type your username and username and password in a web application website, it will go to an application server. Application server will send the information to LDAP server, and there will be a filter for it. Just like in SQL, we log in, and then the username and password goes to the server, and then a query is created. Select star from users, where username is equal to this and password is equal to this. So SQL creates a query and then retrieves the data from the database. It checks the data and now after that it says that whether this user is correct user or not. Same way in SQL we use query. Same way we use LDAP filters. Filters in LDAP. So to retrieve the information, LDAP uses filters. This is an example of filter. Now this filter has multiple operators, so we'll use that. So what are LDAP filters? Filters are basically LDAP queries which are submitted to the server, and those are known as LDAP search filters. You can call it as filter, you can call it as search filter, or you can call it as query. So technically correct word is LDAP search filter, and these are constructed using some prefix notations, and these are the operators for it. So when in a LDAP filter, double equal, this means equal to, this means logical and, this means logical or, this means logical not, and star means wildcard, which means any. So these are the common operators which get used in search filter. And when you go to a web application, a website, this is how the login part will work. So this is how login will work. So when you enter your username and ID and password, you will enter your credentials here. After that you will click on login button. After that, this filter will be created. So this is the filter. Will be request. So request will be sent to the server saying that login.php question mark name is equal to admin and password is equal to secret. Now this is the by default search filter. So this search LDAP filter is find where common name is equal to username and password. Now this will be the actual query after you. This is the query structure. This is the standard query, and this is the query for this particular login. So the query is find a record where common name is equal to admin and password is equal to secret. So this is and find a record where common name is admin and where password is secret. And if you have entered admin and secret, it will go to the LDAP servers. Server will run this, and server will say that yes, there is an account, there is a record with this credentials, and then LDAP server will go to the web application server, and web application server will allow your login, will allow you to proceed further, and will assign you a session cookie. So this is how login works in a web application when a website is using LDAP search query. So this is how it works. Now when you want to perform LDAP injection in authentication, so there are multiple things we can do.
By which an attacker.
Okay, so you can do multiple things via LDAP injection. And you can do two things. First, you can do information disclosure via LDAP injection, and then you can do authentication bypass via LDAP injection. So we'll have a look at the second example, which is authentication bypass via LDAP injection. So what we will do is we don't have the valid credentials for an account, but still we want to log in via in the web application, and we will use LDAP injection payload to perform an authentication bypass. So we will log in via an invalid credentials using LDAP payload, and the vulnerability is called LDAP injection. So what we will do is, in the username we will enter this kind of a payload, which is admin, then closing bracket, then opening bracket, then end, and then double closing bracket, and we'll enter some random thing as the password. So our payload is here, and we will click on login. Now let us see what happens. So this is my payload. This is my payload admin. This is a valid username. So you need to enter a valid username. Password can be anything. And this is your payload. After that you click on login, and after that this is the query. So how does it work? you to bypass authentication, this is your valid username, and you close the bracket, you open your bracket, and then you close it again. Now, what is the meaning of it? So the search filter will become like this. I'll tell you how. So when you submit this, there will be a search filter, and let me see. So this will become the search filter. This is how it will work. So your yes. So this is how the search filter will become. And user is admin, and then you close the query, and this part of it, password is equal to part of it, gets ignored. So what happens? This will become the query. Check for a record which has this username Sam, and end the query, and do nothing for the password. So we are not entering any. Even if we are entering invalid password, or even if we are entering a blank password, this will be the query at the server side, at the LDAP server side. Check for a record which has this username. So even if you have a valid invalid password, still it will allow you to log in. So this is how it will work. So this will be the query. Check for a record which has username Sam, and do nothing. Now web application server, website server will take this query, and it will go to the LDAP server, and it will ask a question to the LDAP server saying that, hey LDAP server, do you have this user in your record? LDAP server will say that, let me check, and then LDAP server will say that, okay, I need to find a user or record with this username. Okay, he has that because this is a valid username. Then server will say that, yes, I have this record. So now the response will go to the web application server, website server. Well, website server will say that, okay, in such a case, user is valid. I'll approve the user's login, and I'll assign him a session ID. And then web application website server will allow the user to log in, and this is how login will happen. So this is how you perform LDAP injection in authentication, and you can do authentication bypass for. Now let us understand more in detail. Let us understand this exact same thing more in detail. So this is an example of a search filter. So this is a search filter, and user is equal to username, and password is equal to password. This search filter instructs the query to find an LDAP record with this username and this password. And when you perform an attack, when your input gets added or appended in the search filter, you without any validation or sanitization, if you add star, if you close the query, if you add %, or if you insert malicious characters, and if those characters are appended into the LDAP query without any validation or sanitization, it will change the meaning of the query, and it may return list of all users, or it can allow you to bypass the login. So you can, when testing, you can use try and error approach, where you can insert opening bracket, and star, and other malicious character to check for the errors, and after that, based on the error, you will be able to see that whether this application is using LDAP or not. If the application is using LDAP, then you can insert a payload like we have entered, and then you can perform the LDAP injection and perform authentication bypass. So if the user or the attacker enters a payload like this in the username field, then the search filter will become this: find a node with username admin and do nothing. This part of it, white password part of it, will get ignored. So the server will check for a record for a node which has username admin. It will not check for the password. And this is how it works. You inject a payload, it goes to the web application server. Web application server accepts the payload, it ignores the password field, and then performs a search for the admin account. The search is performed here, and then LDAP server will say that here is the node with the admin name. It will go to the web server, and then upon a successful authentication, so if the account is present, LDAP server will proceed to byte the connection, and this application server will think that the credentials are correct, and then it will assign the cookie, and you allow the user to log in. So in terms of LDAP injection, these three are the security impacts. First is information disclosure. So we have not taken an example of information disclosure. We'll try to do that right away, but we saw an example of authentication bypass. So let's say there is a search functionality. You can search for files, you can search for machines, and if you build a search filter with star, then it is possible that it will return all the records, all the machines, all the users. So that this is how you can perform. So if there is a search functionality, search button, and if uses LDAP, then you can perform an information disclosure by putting star in the search box. You can perform authentication bypass, we just saw that, and via search filter, via creating malicious search filter, and via injection of LDAP payloads, you can bypass access control, you can gain access to higher privilege accounts. And let us see a demo of it. So I have these screenshots. Just give me a second. If you need to set up this in your laptop, first you will need to install this, which is Apache Active Directory Studio, and after that you will need to install this web application called Mutilday 2, and you will need to configure it, and after that you will have this LDAP server up and running. So for this server, in this example, we are using Apache Active Directory Studio as an LDAP server, and for the website part, we are using OWASP Mutilday 2. So this is the setup for it. The DC is Mutilday, domain control is local. Because we are not using, using it on local machine. We are not using any for it enterprise. So this is a local Active Directory. We have multiple common names. First is CN admin. This is a common name. Then we have some more common names. We have groups as well, and then we have rooms. There are 3 common names, so 3 nodes in this room. These are the conference rooms where you can book. So I'll give you the example. So in Mutilday 2, there is a functionality called conference room lookup. And whenever, let's say, there is a company and they have developed an internal website for booking a conference room. So let's say you want to do a meeting in the conference room. So and you will use this website to find which are the available rooms. So this is the functionality, and these are the 3 rooms. First is 1F104, which is first floor 104. Second is 2F204, which is second floor 204, and third conference room is Joyce Place. And there are 3 users in this Active Directory LDAP implementation. First is Fred, second is Jeremy, and third user is Sally. And there are groups in this implementation. When I visit this application, I'll click on find available rooms. After that, the website or the web application will send a request to the server, and this is the request: post mutilday index.php. This is the name of the page, and here is the request. Now, as you can see here, default the website has sent a hidden parameter called default room common name is equal to 1F104, and this is the action part of it, find available rooms. So they are sending a hidden parameter. How do I know that? Because if you view the page source, you will see that input type is equal to hidden, ID is equal to default room common name input, and this is the value for it, 1F104. So this means that 1F104, first floor 104 is always available. It will always show. And this is how it works. So once this request goes to the server, this is the server side codes. This is the server side filter for it. So your input will go here. What is the name of the input? This is the name of the input: default underscore common underscore room, default underscore room underscore common underscore name, and the value is this. So this will go here, and from here it will go to the server side application code. And this is the filter. Filter is called or common name is equal to 2F204 or common is equal to user's input. So default value is passed here. So the search filter will become common name is equal to 2F204 or common name is equal to 1F104. So this is the filter. Now after that LDAP will perform the search query. After that it will get the entries and then it will list the entries and then it will return us the result. So when you see this is the search filter, return a record or return result where a common name is 2F204 or common name is 1F104. So both the common names are present here. So web browser sent this result, a web browser sent this value, and this value is already present in the server side code. So because of this, it will return these two records or these two results in the query. So these are then in the website GUI it will show that we have two rooms available. First is 1F104 and second is 2F204. Now what we will do is we'll go to Bobsuit, we'll go to proxy. After that we'll go to options, and we will enable these three things. First we will unhide the form fields. After that we will check on these two options, and once we reload the page we will have the hidden text box visible to us. And what we will do is we will remove the by default value, and after that we'll inject a special character or malicious character for LDAP. That's an opening bracket, and we'll click on this. And now the search filter will, after that this will go to the server, and now after that this will become the search filter. My default value is this. I have entered and closing round bracket, and this will become the query. Now the query is return a record where common name is 2F204 or return a record where common name is closing bracket. So this will create an error. This will create a syntax error in the LDAP search filter. So search will not get performed. This will create an error, and it will say that, and once I do that, the server will say that LDAP search, this is the function LDAP search, this is the function LDAP search. It will say that bad search filter, and it will return the path. After that there are two more function calls. LDAP is underscore get entries, LDAP underscore get entries. So these are the two functions. It will create an error here because there is a syntax error. So it says that the method call accepts parameter to be a resource, which in this page. So it returns an error. So with this, via a malicious input we can identify, and then it is disclosing an error. So with this we can say that this application is using LDAP. So first step is the identification for it. Identify if the application is using LDAP or not. If it uses LDAP technology, then perform LDAP injection. Otherwise you don't perform. So first is the identification phase. After that so first is the fuzzing phase, which is called the identification phase. For fuzzing, to check whether the application is using LDAP or not, we can try these characters in the input field. We can try space, we can try hash, we can try double quote, we can try plus, we can try comma, we can try semicolon, we can try greater than, less than, we can try backward slash, we can try and, we can try opening bracket, we can try closing brackets. These are the special characters we can try for fuzzing to identify that whether the application is using LDAP or not. And now is the injection or exploit part of it. The special character to return all the records is star. So here I am performing. So in the PPT example we saw an example of login bypass. Here we'll see an example of information disclosure. So in the input field I typed star and I clicked on find available rooms. Now the input will go to the server, and this is the search filter. Now return record or perform search query where common name is equal to 2F204 or common name is anything. Anything means all the records. So then it will perform the search, and it will get all the entries, and it will return me all the entries. So the search will become a search for records where either the common name is 2F204 or common name is anything. So in this example it will return everything. So this is an example of information disclosure via LDAP injection. So we have all the information. These are the users, this is the admin. So we have every information which is available in the Active Directory server, LDAP server. So this is was our payload. So if your input is single input, then your payload will become this. If so there is only one text box, right? So which is only one input. So if your input is 1, then you can try star payload, and your search filter will become like this. Attribute is equal to star. If you have 2 inputs, then your payload will become like this. Value, closing bracket, opening bracket, common name is equal to star. So this star this value is value of the first input, first text box, and this is the value or payload of the second text box, and this will become your payload. This is your payload, and this is your search filter in the background. So this is how the search filter will become. Attribute is equal to value, closing bracket, opening bracket, attribute 2 is equal to star. So it will return all the records. Now we became aware about the vulnerability, and now let us check the remediation part of it. Very first remediation is strictly validate user input. Whenever user is entering any malicious characters such as opening bracket, closing bracket, star, pipe sign, and % logical or logical not, those user input containing LDAP special characters should be rejected. So if your user enters this, and if a request comes to you with this special character, reject that request. Strictly perform an input validation from the server side. Only allow alphanumeric characters, ABCD, capital ABCD, small ABCD, and the numbers from 0 to 9. Only allow these characters in the user input. Don't allow any other input from the user. So that is the secondary mechanism. For primary mechanism, you can use a component like link to active directory. So there is a component. This is a component. This is a just like jQuery, just like Bootstrap. It's a piece of software where we can implement this in the active directory. So there is a component called link to active directory. If you install it and if you configure it, it will automatically escape the user input. So if the user has entered this or this or this, it will escape the user input. It will not use that part of it, that malicious user input, to build a search filter. So this is the first recommendation. If the user inputs at any special character, user reject that. If you don't want to do that, this is the another mechanism. It will auto escape the user input. And the third mitigation is to the third mechanism, thing is to implement least privilege, where you with every LDAP account you minimize the privileges. With this LDAP account or this user account should be able to access only this much of information. So you minimize the privilege, you minimize the access. So even if LDAP injection happens, the user will be only able to access only limited amount of information. And Black Hat has published a detailed presentation on LDAP injection. It covers all the attacks, all the injections. So I recommend you to read it. And if there is any question, please let me know. With this we end our session, and if there are any questions, please let me know.